Step aside. This line isn't for people like you. The sentence landed sharper than the echo of rolling suitcases across polished tile, and for a second, even the overhead announcements seemed to fade into static as Ava Brooks stopped mid-step, her worn sneakers planted just behind the boarding line, her fingers tightening around a slightly creased boarding pass that looked like it had been folded and unfolded too many times, her eyes lifting slowly to meet the woman in front of her, a woman wrapped in a tailored coat that probably cost more than Ava's entire week, maybe month, of work, the kind of woman who didn't raise her voice but didn't need to, because the way she looked at Ava already said everything, already drew a line that Ava wasn't supposed to cross, and around them, people noticed, not openly at first, just small glances, a pause in conversation, a subtle shift in posture, then a quiet ripple of attention, as if something more interesting than flight delays had just appeared at gate C12, and Ava felt it. That shift, that invisible spotlight pressing against her skin, colder than the air conditioning humming above, her throat tightening just slightly as she glanced down at her ticket again, checking the seat number like it might have changed in the last 10 seconds, like maybe she really was in the wrong place, even though she'd checked it 3 times already while sitting near the charging station by the window, watching planes taxi under a pale gray sky, counting minutes, counting breaths, telling herself, just get on the plane. Just get home. But now the gate agent was looking at her too, her expression not angry, not even rude, just tired in a way that made it worse, like Ava was another small inconvenience in a long shift. "Ma'am, can I see your boarding pass?" she asked, her hand already halfway out, palm open but impatient, and Ava nodded quickly, stepping forward, careful, almost apologetic, handing it over with both hands like it mattered more that way, like maybe if she showed enough respect, enough quiet, this moment would pass without breaking. But behind her, someone let out a soft laugh. Not loud, not cruel enough to be called out, just enough to be heard, just enough to make her shoulders pull in a fraction, and somewhere to the side, a phone lifted, the faint click of a camera app opening barely audible but unmistakable, the world narrowing down to fluorescent lights reflecting off the glossy floor, the distant beeping of a cart reversing, the hum of engines far outside the glass walls, and the sound of her own heartbeat, steady but heavy, as the agent scanned the ticket once, then again, her brow furrowing just slightly, and for a moment, nothing happened. Just a pause that stretched a little too long, a silence that didn't belong. In a place this busy, and Ava stood there, still, waiting, hoping, not saying a word, because sometimes silence was the only thing that kept everything from falling apart. The agent's scanner beeped again, softer this time, like it was unsure of itself, and she tilted the boarding pass slightly under the light, eyes narrowing at the small printed code near the corner, the one most people would not even notice, her fingers pausing as if something about it did not match the usual rhythm of her routine, and Ava saw that hesitation, felt it ripple through the space between them, fragile but real, like the first crack in something solid. But before it could turn into anything else, the woman behind the rope barrier let out a quiet sigh, stepping closer, her heels clicking with deliberate precision against the floor. "Is there a problem?" she asked, not really asking, her tone already leaning toward an answer, and the agent glanced up, just for a second. "It is just taking a moment," she said. But the woman did not step back, did not wait, her eyes sliding toward Ava again, measuring, dismissing, as if the delay itself proved her point, and around them the line began to slow, people shifting their weight, checking watches, the subtle impatience of travelers building like pressure in a sealed cabin. Someone behind Ava muttered something under their breath about missing connections. Another voice whispered, "Why is this taking so long?" And the phone that had been raised earlier was still there, now steady, capturing every second of the pause, every flicker of discomfort on Ava's face. Though she tried to keep it still, tried to stand the way her grandmother had taught her, shoulders back, chin level, even when the room wanted to fold you smaller, even when every instinct said step out of the way and disappear, but she did not move, not yet, her fingers now empty, hovering slightly where the ticket had been, as if holding on to something invisible, and the agent scanned again, slower, then pressed a key, then another, her lips pressing together as she leaned closer to the screen. the glow reflecting faintly in her eyes. And for a moment, just a moment, it looked like she might say something different, something that would shift the entire scene. But instead she exhaled, a quiet breath that carried uncertainty, and reached for the phone at her station. "I just need to verify something," she said, her voice more formal now, more careful. And that was enough. Enough for the woman to shake her head slightly. Enough for a few people in line to exchange looks. Enough for the atmosphere to tilt back toward doubt, toward judgment, toward that familiar edge where one person is singled out and everyone else pretends it is normal. And Ava felt it settle again, heavier this time, pressing into her chest, her gaze dropping just briefly to the polished floor where reflections blurred and stretched under the harsh lights, her own outline barely visible among the movement. And she swallowed, steady, quiet, telling herself the same thing she had been repeating since she booked the flight, since she packed her small bag, since she checked the time every 5 minutes on the ride to the airport. Just get on the plane, just get home. But the seconds kept stretching, and the agent's hand hovered over the phone, and somewhere beyond the gate, a voice called for final boarding on another flight, and the door slid closed with a soft, final sound that lingered just long enough to make everything here feel even more uncertain. The agent's fingers finally tapped the phone, dialing a short internal line, her voice lowering into something more procedural as she turned slightly away. "Hi, I need a quick verification on a boarding code," she said, and the moment she did, the space around Ava shifted again, not louder, not dramatic, just tighter, like the air itself was waiting for a decision it already believed it understood. And the woman behind the barrier crossed her arms now, her patience thinning into something sharper. "This is exactly what I was talking about," she murmured, not bothering to lower her voice enough this time. And a few people nearby nodded without thinking, their agreement quiet but present, as if they had all decided on the same story without needing proof. And Ava felt that story pressing in, shaping her into something smaller, something out of place, her shoulders still squared, but her breath now slower, measured, the way you breathe when you are trying not to let anything crack. Her eyes lifting once toward the large window beyond the gate where a plane sat waiting, its white body reflecting the dull afternoon light, engines silent but ready, a destination within reach, and yet somehow drifting further away with every passing second. And she thought of the last call she had received, the one that came just after midnight, her phone lighting up the dark room, her heart already racing before she even answered, her aunt's voice on the other end trying to stay steady, trying to sound calm, but failing just enough that Ava understood before the words were fully spoken. "You should come if you can," she had said, and Ava had not asked how bad it was, had not asked for details, because some questions do not need answers, some silences already say everything. And now standing here, that memory sat heavy in her chest, anchoring her in place, refusing to let her step back even as the pressure around her grew, even as the agent's side of the conversation stretched longer than it should have, filled with pauses and confirmations and the kind of tone people use when they are unsure but trying to sound certain. And then the agent glanced back at Ava, just briefly, her expression unreadable, and turned slightly further away as if needing distance to finish the call. And that small movement, that subtle shift, was enough for someone in line to exhale loudly. "This is ridiculous," a man muttered, shaking his head, and another voice added, "Some people always hold everyone up," not directed at Ava directly, but not directed either, the kind of comment that lands exactly where it is meant to without ever claiming responsibility. And Ava closed her eyes for just a fraction of a second, not long enough for anyone to notice, just enough to steady herself, her fingers curling slightly at her sides, empty but tense, as if holding on to something invisible again. And when she opened her eyes, she did not look at the people, did not look at the woman, did not even look at the agent. She looked straight ahead, past the gate, past the line, toward that waiting aircraft, as if fixing her focus on the only thing that mattered. And then, just as the murmur of voices began to rise again, just as the moment threatened to slip fully out of her control, a new sound cut through it all, not loud, not sharp, but unmistakably different. A calm voice from behind, steady and grounded. "Is there a reason this passenger is not boarding?" The voice did not rise, did not demand attention, but it carried in a way that made the space respond anyway, like a subtle shift in pressure that everyone felt at once. And the agent turned quickly this time, her posture straightening almost instinctively, the phone still in her hand but forgotten. "Captain," she said, her tone changing, not dramatically, but enough, and Ava felt it. That shift again, this one different, this one quieter but heavier, as if something unseen had just entered the room and taken control without needing to announce it. And the man stepped closer, his uniform crisp, dark navy against the sterile brightness of the terminal, gold stripes catching the overhead light with every small movement, his presence calm, measured, not hurried, but deliberate, his eyes moving first to the agent, then to the boarding pass still resting on the counter, and finally, briefly, to Ava, not lingering, not scanning, just a simple acknowledgement that did not carry judgment, and then back again to the situation. "We are on final boarding," he said evenly, not as a complaint, not as pressure, just a fact placed into the space like a marker, and the agent nodded quickly. "Yes, sir, I am just verifying this ticket," she replied, her words careful now, her earlier uncertainty still there but softened, reshaped, and the woman behind the barrier shifted her weight again, her arms still crossed, her expression tightening slightly as she looked between them, as if recalculating something that had just changed, something she could not fully control anymore. And the captain reached out, not abruptly, just extending his hand toward the boarding pass. "May I?" he asked, and the agent handed it over without hesitation, her fingers releasing it faster than before, and for a second, everything seemed to pause. Again, but this time the silence felt different, not tense, not pointed, just still, like a held breath waiting for direction. And Ava watched as he turned the ticket slightly under the light, his thumb brushing over the printed edge, his gaze narrowing just enough to show focus. Not confusion, not doubt, just recognition building quietly, and the faint murmur of the crowd faded into the background again, replaced by the soft hum of the terminal systems, the distant rolling of luggage wheels, the rhythmic announcement echoing from another gate. And then he looked up, not at the woman, not at the line, but at Ava, his voice lower now, steady. "Miss, who are you traveling to see?" And the question landed gently but directly, cutting through everything else, and Ava hesitated for the smallest fraction of a second, not because she did not know the answer, but because saying it out loud made it real in a way she had been holding back, her throat tightening just slightly as she met his gaze. "My mom," she said, her voice quiet but clear. "She is in the hospital." And the words settled into the space, simple, unadorned, but heavy enough to shift something deeper, and the captain held her gaze for a moment longer, not questioning, not probing, just listening. And then his eyes dropped back to the ticket, to that small printed code near the corner, and something in his expression changed, subtle, almost invisible, but unmistakable, like a piece of a puzzle sliding into place. And he exhaled once, slow and controlled, before turning slightly back toward the agent. "This boarding pass is valid," he said, his tone firm but not loud. "There is no need for further verification." And the words did not echo, did not demand attention, but they carried authority in a way that did not need reinforcement. And for the first time since the moment began, the tension did not just pause. It shifted direction entirely. The words settled with quiet finality, and for a moment no one moved. Not the agent, not the passengers, not even the woman who had spoken first, her posture still rigid but her expression no longer certain, as if the ground beneath her assumption had shifted just enough to make her hesitate. And the agent quickly straightened, her hand lowering the phone completely now. "Yes, sir," she said, her voice more composed, more precise, and she reached for the scanner again, this time without doubt, without the extra pause, the device lighting up as she passed the boarding pass across it. A clean, immediate beep cutting through the silence, sharper than before, definitive, and she handed the ticket back to Ava with both hands. A small but noticeable change. "You are cleared to board," she said, her tone softer now, careful in a way it had not been earlier, and Ava felt the shift before. She even moved, felt it in the way the space around her opened just slightly, the invisible barrier dissolving, the pressure easing just enough for her lungs to take in a fuller breath, and she reached forward, her fingers brushing the edge of the ticket as she took it back, the paper still slightly warm from the captain's hand. And for a second, she just held it, grounding herself in that small, tangible proof that she belonged here, that she had always belonged here, even when the room had tried to tell her otherwise. And behind her the line adjusted. People stepping forward again, their impatience redirected, their earlier murmurs fading into something quieter, less certain. While the woman near the barrier shifted her gaze away, her arms slowly uncrossing, her attention suddenly finding interest elsewhere, as if disengaging from the moment could undo it, could remove her from it entirely. But the change had already happened, and it lingered in the air, subtle but undeniable. And the captain did not step back immediately. He remained there just long enough to ensure the movement continued, his presence steady, unspoken authority guiding the moment forward. And then he turned slightly toward Ava again, not with ceremony, not with anything performative, just a simple, measured acknowledgement. "You should go ahead," he said, his voice low enough that it did not carry beyond her, but clear enough that it did not need to. And she nodded once, a small motion, controlled, her shoulders lifting just slightly as she adjusted the strap of her bag. And then she stepped forward, crossing the threshold that had felt so distant just minutes ago, the soft carpet of the jet bridge replacing the hard tile beneath her feet, the lighting shifting from cold white to a warmer tone. And with each step the noise of the terminal faded behind her, replaced by a quieter, contained space that felt almost suspended in time. And she did not look back, not at the line, not at the woman, not even at the gate, because some moments are not meant to be revisited. They are meant to be left behind, carried only in the way they change you. And as she walked further down the narrow corridor, the faint hum of the aircraft grew stronger, steady, and reassuring, like a promise waiting just ahead. And behind her, at the gate, the captain finally turned away, his gaze lingering for a fraction of a second longer on the now empty space where she had stood, before shifting back to the boarding process. But something in his expression remained, something thoughtful, something that suggested this moment had not been routine for him either, not entirely. As if the small printed code on that ticket had meant more than just clearance, more than just permission to board, and whatever it was, it stayed with him, quiet and unresolved, even as the next passenger stepped forward and the rhythm of the airport resumed around him. The narrow jet bridge carried a different kind of silence, softer, enclosed, the hum of the aircraft ahead growing steadier with each step as Ava moved forward, her pace measured, not rushed, as if she was still adjusting to the shift that had just happened, her fingers lightly brushing the edge of her boarding pass again, feeling its texture like reassurance. And for a moment, she let her shoulders drop, just slightly, the tension she had been holding finally loosening in a quiet release, the memory of the gate already beginning to fade behind her, not gone, but distant, like a sound heard through a wall. And yet something stayed with her, not the words, not the looks, but the feeling of being seen differently, first one way, then another, as if her place in the world could be decided in seconds by people who did not know her at all. And she exhaled slowly, steadying herself again, because the reason she was here had not changed, the urgency had not softened. And as she reached the aircraft door, a flight attendant greeted her with a practiced smile. "Welcome aboard," she said, her voice warm, neutral, and Ava nodded in return, stepping inside, the cabin lights casting a gentle amber glow that felt almost unreal after the brightness of the terminal. The narrow aisle stretching ahead, passengers already seated, some glancing up briefly before returning to their screens or conversations, the normal rhythm of travel continuing as if nothing unusual had happened just moments before. And Ava moved carefully down the aisle, counting the row numbers quietly in her head until she reached her seat, a window on the left side, midway through the cabin, and she paused for just a second before sitting, placing her bag beneath the seat in front of her, her movements deliberate, controlled, like she was grounding herself in each small action. And once seated, she looked out the window, the wing of the plane cutting across the gray sky, the runway stretching beyond, still and waiting, and she let herself breathe again, deeper this time, her chest rising and falling in a slower rhythm, her eyes closing briefly as the weight of the moment settled, not crushing, but heavy enough to remind her why she had come this far, why she had not stepped out of that line, why she had stayed. And somewhere beyond the cabin, footsteps moved with purpose, the distinct cadence of someone familiar with the space. And a few rows ahead, a subtle shift in attention passed between the crew, quiet but noticeable, as the captain stepped inside, his presence not announced, not highlighted, just there, moving with calm efficiency through the aisle, his gaze scanning briefly, not searching, but aware. And when his eyes passed over Ava's row, they slowed for just a fraction of a second, a moment so small it could have been missed, but it was not entirely. And he continued forward toward the cockpit, disappearing behind the closed door as the cabin settled once more into its steady hum. But something in that brief glance lingered, something unspoken, as if the moment at the gate had not ended there, as if it had simply shifted into something else, something still unfolding, quietly, just beneath the surface of everything that appeared normal. The cabin settled into a low, steady rhythm, the kind that wrapped around you without asking, a quiet blend of soft engine hum, muted conversations, and the occasional click of a seatbelt fastening somewhere down the aisle. And Ava sat still by the window, her hands resting lightly on her lap, her fingers no longer tense but not fully relaxed either, as if her body had not yet decided whether it was safe to let go of everything it had just held together, her gaze drifting outside again where the runway stretched beneath a pale sky, unmoving for now, waiting for clearance, just like everything else. And she inhaled slowly, counting the breath without thinking, 1, 2, 3, then exhaling just as carefully, trying to match the rhythm of the plane, the rhythm of something controlled, predictable, unlike the moment at the gate that had shifted so quickly it still felt unreal. And across the aisle, a man adjusted his jacket, glancing briefly in her direction before looking away, not curious, not unkind, just another passenger moving through his own routine. And that normalcy, that quiet indifference, felt almost unfamiliar after what had just happened, like stepping into a different world without leaving the same space. And Ava leaned back slightly, her head resting against the seat, her eyes closing for just a second longer this time, allowing the hum of the cabin to settle deeper, to soften the sharp edges of the last few minutes. But her mind did not fully quiet. It moved instead to the hospital room she had not yet seen, to the image she had been trying not to imagine, machines beeping steadily, curtains half drawn, her mother lying still in a way that did not feel like rest, and her chest tightened again. Not from the gate, not from the people, but from the distance. She had not yet closed, and she opened her eyes quickly, grounding herself again in the present, in the seat beneath her, in the small oval window framing a slice of sky, in the faint vibration now beginning to move through the plane as systems powered up. And then, without announcement, the cabin door at the front opened briefly, a quiet movement that most passengers did not notice, but Ava did, not because she was watching for it, but because something in her attention had sharpened. And the captain stepped out again, not fully into the aisle, just enough to speak with one of the flight attendants in a low voice, his posture relaxed but focused, his expression composed in that way that suggested he was already thinking several steps ahead. And the attendant nodded, her face shifting into something more attentive, more precise, before she moved down the aisle with a quiet efficiency that carried purpose without drawing attention. And as she passed Ava's row, she slowed just slightly, not stopping, not addressing her directly, but her eyes flickered briefly toward the seat number, then back again, as if confirming something unseen, something already decided elsewhere. And Ava noticed it, that small deviation from routine, that subtle acknowledgement that something about her presence on this flight was different, though no one had said it out loud. And she felt it again, that quiet thread connecting the moment at the gate to whatever was unfolding now, not dramatic, not obvious, but real enough to be felt beneath the surface. And she straightened just slightly in her seat, her fingers brushing once more against the edge of her boarding pass now tucked safely into her bag, as if reminding herself that she was here, that she had made it this far, even if the journey was not over yet. And somewhere ahead, behind the closed cockpit door, decisions were being made, small adjustments aligning, the kind that passengers rarely noticed, but that could change everything without a single announcement. The aircraft door sealed with a soft, final click that echoed more in feeling than in sound, and the cabin shifted almost imperceptibly as the outside world separated itself from the space inside. The overhead bins closed, the aisle cleared, and the flight attendants moved with quiet precision, checking belts, adjusting bags, their voices low and calm as they prepared the cabin for departure, and Ava sat still, her back straight against the seat, her eyes now open, focused not on the window but on the subtle movements around her, the rhythm of preparation, the quiet signals that something was about to begin. And yet beneath that routine, something else lingered, something unresolved, like a question that had not fully been asked yet. And then the intercom clicked on, a brief burst of static before a voice filled the cabin, steady, composed, familiar now. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain speaking." The words flowed smoothly, practiced, but there was something just slightly different beneath the tone, something quieter, more deliberate. "We will be departing shortly, and we expect a smooth flight today." A pause, brief but noticeable, as if the next words were being chosen more carefully than usual. "Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to ensure that all of our passengers are comfortable and accounted for." And the sentence lingered in the air, not unusual enough to raise concern, but different enough to shift attention. A few passengers glancing up from their screens, others pausing mid-conversation, and Ava felt it too. That subtle change, her fingers tightening slightly against the fabric of her jeans as she listened. Not entirely sure why her focus had sharpened again, but unable to ignore it. And somewhere near the front of the cabin, a flight attendant nodded once, as if confirming something already understood, her posture aligning with the captain's words in a way that suggested coordination beyond routine. And the voice continued, calm but firm. "If there are any special accommodations or urgent needs among our passengers today, please do not hesitate to inform our crew." Another pause, softer this time, almost personal. "We are here to make sure you get where you need to be." And the message settled into the space, simple, but carrying weight beyond its surface meaning. And Ava swallowed quietly, her gaze lowering for a moment as the words echoed somewhere deeper than expected, not directed at her specifically, not openly, but close enough to feel. And then the intercom clicked off, returning the cabin to its steady hum. But the atmosphere had shifted again, not dramatically, not visibly, just enough to make the silence feel different, more aware, more intentional. And a few rows ahead, a passenger adjusted in their seat, glancing toward the cockpit door as if trying to understand what had just passed through the air, while another simply shrugged and returned to their phone, dismissing it as routine. But Ava did not dismiss it. She could not, because something in that voice, in that pause, in that choice of words, connected back to the moment at the gate, to the way the captain had looked at her boarding pass, to the way his expression had changed just slightly. And she felt it again, that quiet thread pulling forward, not yet visible, not yet explained, but moving. And as the plane began to push back slowly from the gate, the low rumble beneath her feet building, she realized that whatever this was, whatever had started outside in that line, it had not ended when she stepped onto the plane. It had simply followed her here, waiting, unfolding one quiet moment at a time. The plane eased backward from the gate, the motion slow at first, almost unnoticeable, until the ground outside began to drift sideways through the small, oval window, and Ava felt it in her chest before she fully saw it. That subtle shift from waiting to moving, from stillness to something irreversible, and she leaned slightly closer to the glass, her breath faint against its cool surface, watching the terminal slide away, the gate shrinking into distance, the place where everything had just happened now becoming smaller, quieter, like it belonged to another version of the day. And yet the feeling of it had not left her. It lingered in the way her fingers still pressed lightly together, in the way her shoulders had not fully relaxed, in the way her thoughts kept circling back to that moment, that voice, that look. And then the engines grew louder, a low, steady build that filled the cabin, not harsh, but powerful. A reminder that the plane was no longer just a space, it was a direction, a path forward whether she was ready or not. And the flight attendants moved down the aisle one last time, checking seatbelts, their movements smooth, practiced, but Ava noticed the same attendant from earlier pause again near her row, just briefly, her eyes flickering toward Ava's seat, then toward the front of the cabin, as if confirming something silent, something already decided, and Ava felt it again. That quiet awareness settling around her, not uncomfortable, not threatening, just present, like a thread connecting small moments into something larger, something she could not yet see. And she shifted slightly in her seat, her hands now resting on the armrests, grounding herself as the plane turned slowly toward the runway. The wide stretch of concrete coming into view, lined with lights that seemed to stretch endlessly ahead, and for a moment, everything slowed again, the engines idling, the aircraft pausing at the threshold as if waiting for permission, and in that pause, Ava's thoughts returned, not to the gate this time, but to the hospital, to the room she had not yet entered, to the words she had not yet said, to the possibility that time was not as steady as the plane beneath her, that it could slip, quietly, without warning, and her throat tightened. Again, but she held it there, contained, because she had made it this far, because she was on this plane, because she was moving towards something that mattered more than the moment behind her. And then, without warning, the engines surged, the force pressing her gently back into her seat as the plane began its takeoff roll. Faster now, the runway lights blurring into streaks, the ground rushing beneath them, and Ava held her breath for a second, not from fear, but from the weight of it, the sense that everything was accelerating at once, the past falling away, the future approaching too quickly to grasp, and just as the wheels lifted, just as the plane left the ground and the city began to drop away beneath them, the intercom clicked on again, the captain's voice returning, calm but carrying a different edge now, quieter, more direct. "Miss Brooks," he said, and the sound of her name in that space, in that moment, made everything else fade again, the engines, the cabin, the world. Outside, narrowing her focus to a single point as the voice continued. "We are making arrangements to ensure you arrive as quickly as possible." And the words hung there, unexpected, unexplained, and yet unmistakably meant for her, as if the journey she thought she understood had just shifted into something else entirely. The name lingered in the air long after the intercom clicked off, as if the cabin itself had not yet decided how to absorb it. And for a moment no one moved, not because they were told not to, but because something about hearing a single passenger addressed like that, midair, shifted the rhythm everyone had settled into, and Ava felt it immediately, the weight of it pressing into her chest, her fingers tightening against the armrest as her eyes widened just slightly, her breath catching before she could steady it again, because this was no longer quiet, no longer subtle. This was real, spoken, undeniable, and she glanced around instinctively, not searching for attention, but aware of it now, aware of the way a few heads had turned, the way conversations had paused mid-sentence, the way the space around her had shifted once more, but this time not with doubt, not with dismissal, something else entirely, something closer to curiosity, to recognition, and she swallowed slowly, her gaze dropping to her lap as if grounding herself could bring the moment back under control, but it did not, because her name had already been spoken, and it could not be taken back, and somewhere ahead, behind the cockpit door, decisions were already unfolding, quiet but precise, the kind that did not need explanation to change everything. And the plane continued its climb, the city below shrinking into patterns of light and shadow, the horizon stretching wider as they rose, and Ava felt the pressure shift in her ears. The subtle adjustment of altitude, the physical reminder that she was moving farther from where she started and closer to where she needed to be. And yet now, there was something more layered into that movement, something intentional, and the same flight attendant approached again, this time stopping at her row without hesitation, her expression calm but more focused than before. "Miss Brooks," she said softly, her voice low enough not to carry far, but clear enough to hold weight, and Ava looked up, meeting her gaze with a mix of uncertainty and quiet resolve. "Yes," she answered, her voice steady despite the tension still sitting beneath it, and the attendant nodded slightly, as if confirming something already known. "The captain has made a request on your behalf," she said, choosing her words carefully. "We are coordinating with ground control at your destination to arrange immediate assistance upon landing." And the sentence settled slowly, each word carrying meaning that extended beyond its surface, and Ava blinked once, processing it, not fully understanding yet, but feeling the intention behind it, The shift from simply being a passenger to being someone accounted for, someone prioritized, and her throat tightened again, not from pressure this time, but from something deeper, something that felt unfamiliar in its clarity, and she nodded once, unable to form more words in that moment. And the attendant offered a small, reassuring smile before stepping back, continuing down the aisle as if nothing unusual had occurred. But everything had, and Ava sat there, still, her thoughts moving faster now, connecting pieces she had not fully seen before. The code on the ticket, the captain's expression, the announcement, the way the crew had moved with quiet coordination, and she realized then, slowly, that this had not been random, not entirely. That something about her journey had been seen long before she stepped onto that plane, something that had now surfaced, quietly, but with purpose, and as the aircraft leveled slightly, continuing its ascent into open sky, Ava looked out the window again, the clouds now forming a soft, endless layer beneath them, and for the first time since the gate, since the line, since the words that had tried to make her smaller, she felt something shift inside her, not loud, not overwhelming, but steady, like the beginning of something she had not expected, something that had been set in motion the moment she chose not to step aside. The cabin returned to its quiet rhythm, but something beneath it had changed, something subtle yet undeniable, like a current running just under still water, and Ava could feel it in the way her thoughts no longer circled aimlessly but moved with direction now, connecting moments that had once felt separate, the gate, the pause, the captain's eyes on her ticket, the announcement, the attendant's quiet confirmation, all of it forming a pattern she had not recognized before, and she sat a little straighter, her back no longer pressed into the seat for support, but holding itself, her breath steadier, deeper, as if her body had finally caught up with what her mind was beginning to understand. And across the aisle, the man who had glanced at her earlier looked again, this time not quickly, not dismissively, but with a kind of quiet acknowledgement, as if he too had sensed the shift, though he could not name it, and then looked away, returning to his own space, his own thoughts, because whatever this moment was, it belonged to her, not to the room. And Ava turned her gaze back to the window, the clouds now stretching endlessly beneath them, soft and bright, almost unreal in their stillness. And for a moment she allowed herself to sit in that image, to let it quiet the noise that had built inside her since the night before, the urgency, the fear, the weight of what might be waiting when she landed. And her fingers moved slowly to her bag, unzipping it just enough to reach inside, pulling out the small folded paper she had kept close since she left, the hospital address written in careful handwriting, the ink slightly smudged at the edges, and she held it for a second, her thumb tracing the letters without really seeing them, just feeling the reality of it, grounding herself again in the reason she was here. And as she folded it back and slipped it away, the intercom clicked once more, softer this time, not the broad announcement from earlier, but something more contained, more direct. "Miss Brooks." The voice came again, lower, almost as if it had been adjusted for her alone, and Ava's breath paused, not from shock now, but from anticipation, from the sense that whatever had begun was moving forward, and the voice continued, steady and calm. "I want you to know that the request placed on your ticket was reviewed personally this morning." A brief pause, just enough to let the words settle. Compassion travel is not something we take lightly. And Ava felt it then, clearly, the meaning behind everything that had unfolded, the reason the code had mattered, the reason the captain had looked twice, the reason the crew had moved the way they had. And her chest tightened again, but this time it was not from pressure or uncertainty. It was from something else, something closer to being seen, fully, without needing to explain, and the voice continued, softer now, but carrying weight that reached deeper than any raised tone could. "You did the right thing by getting on this flight." And the words settled into her in a way that no apology at the gate ever could have, because they were not about what had happened there. They were about what came next. And Ava closed her eyes for just a moment, her breath steady as she let that truth sit. Let it replace the doubt that had tried to take hold earlier, and when she opened them again, the clouds outside were still there, unchanged, endless, and for the first time since the moment began, she felt something shift completely inside her, not a release, not an ending, but a quiet, steady strength, like something that had always been there, now finally allowed to surface, as the plane carried her forward into whatever was waiting beyond the sky. The hum of the engines settled into something almost hypnotic now, a steady vibration that ran through the seat, through the air, through her chest, and Ava sat there with her eyes open, no longer drifting between thoughts, but anchored fully in the moment, the captain's words still echoing quietly in her mind, not loud, not overwhelming, just present in a way that felt different from everything else that had been said to her that day. And she let out a slow breath, deeper than before, her shoulders easing down as if something invisible had finally been set aside. And across the cabin, movement continued as usual, a flight attendant adjusting a bag in the overhead bin, a passenger flipping through a magazine, someone tapping softly on a phone screen, ordinary moments layered over something that was no longer ordinary for her. And she reached again into her bag, not hurried, just deliberate, pulling out her phone this time, the screen lighting up her face in a soft glow. And for a second she hesitated, her thumb hovering over the contact she had been avoiding since boarding. The hospital number saved under a simple name, no extra words, no labels, just what it was, real and immediate. And she inhaled slowly before pressing call, bringing the phone to her ear as the ringing began, each tone stretching slightly longer than it should have, each second carrying weight. And then the line clicked, a voice on the other end, calm but distant, professional, asking her name, confirming details, and Ava answered quietly, clearly, her voice steady in a way that surprised even her. And as the conversation unfolded, the words came without hesitation, not rushed, not broken, just real. And when she finally asked the question she had been holding back, the one that mattered more than anything else, there was a pause, brief but enough, and then the answer came, careful, measured, not final but not certain either. And Ava closed her eyes for just a moment, absorbing it, not collapsing under it, not pulling away, just holding it there, letting it settle, because she understood now that this was what the flight had always been about, not just distance, not just time, but being present for something that could not wait. And when she opened her eyes again, the clouds outside had shifted, slightly, the light changing, softer now, warmer, and she lowered the phone slowly, her hand resting in her lap as the call ended, the silence returning around her, but no longer heavy, no longer pressing. And a flight attendant passed by again, pausing just long enough to offer a quiet nod, not intrusive, not questioning, just there. And Ava returned it with a small movement of her own, her posture steady, her gaze clear. And somewhere beyond the cabin, the aircraft adjusted its course slightly, a subtle shift that most passengers would not notice. But she felt it, not physically, but in the way everything now seemed aligned toward one direction, one purpose. And she leaned her head gently back against the seat, her eyes lifting once more to the window, to the endless stretch of sky ahead. And for the first time since stepping into that airport, since hearing those words that tried to define her place, she no longer felt like she was being carried by the moment. She felt like she was moving with it, steady, certain, ready for whatever waited when the plane touched the ground. The descent began almost unnoticed, a gentle shift in the angle of the plane, the engine softening into a lower hum as the clouds outside the window started to rise instead of stretch. And Ava felt it not just in the movement, but in the quiet change within herself, the way her breathing had found a rhythm that no longer fought the moment, the way her hands rested calmly now, no longer gripping, no longer holding on, just present. And she watched as the sky slowly gave way to glimpses of land below, faint at first, then clearer, roads like thin lines, buildings like small shapes waiting in stillness. And somewhere down there was the place she needed to be, the place that had pulled her through everything that had happened, from the moment she stepped into that airport to the moment her name had been spoken above the clouds. And the intercom clicked on once more, the captain's voice returning, steady, grounded. "We will be landing shortly," he said, simple, direct, and yet there was something quieter beneath it. Something that did not need to be explained, because it had already been shown, not in words, but in actions, in the way a moment had been redirected, in the way one decision had changed the direction of everything that followed. And Ava closed her eyes for just a second, letting that truth settle fully this time. not as something she questioned, but something she understood, and when she opened them again, the plane was lower now, the ground closer, details sharper, the runway coming into view, and she felt her chest rise with a deeper breath, not out of fear, not out of uncertainty, but out of readiness, because whatever waited for her beyond that landing, she would meet it, not as someone who had been pushed aside, not as someone who had been made to feel small, but as someone who had stayed, who had held her place even when it would have been easier to step back. And as the wheels touched the runway with a firm, steady contact, the slight jolt grounding everything into reality, the cabin, shifting forward just slightly before settling again. Ava remained still, her gaze forward, her expression calm, and the plane slowed, rolling down the strip of concrete that marked the end of one journey and the beginning of something else. And when it finally came to a stop, the seatbelt sign still lit, the cabin quiet once more, she did not rush to stand, did not reach for her bag immediately. She simply sat there for a moment, breathing, letting the weight of it pass through her, and somewhere ahead, the cockpit door opened again, footsteps moving with purpose, not hurried, not loud, but intentional. And though she did not turn to look, she knew, in that quiet, certain way that does not need confirmation, that the same presence that had shifted everything at the gate was still there, still moving, still ensuring that what mattered most would not be delayed. And as she finally reached down to gather her bag, rising with the rest of the passengers as the aisle began to fill, she carried that with her, not as a memory of what had happened, but as something steadier, something that had changed the way the moment ended and the way the next one would begin. Because sometimes it is not the noise, not the confrontation, not the moment of being seen by everyone, that defines what happens next. It is the quiet decision of one person to see clearly, to act without hesitation, and to remind the world, even in the smallest space between a boarding line and a cabin door, that dignity does not depend on where you stand, but on who you choose to be.